Today we are going to demonstrate how to install the Companion Rigid Docking Module onto a rigid wheelchair frame. For today's video, we will be using a Permobil Tie-Lite wheelchair. Make sure your rigid docking module kit contains all the required parts as shown. In order to complete the full installation, you will require the following tools. To begin the installation, place the wheelchair on its back in order to access the crossbar and rear axle. The docking module must be centered on the wheelchair frame, so start by measuring and locating the center point on the main crossbar and the rear axle. Mark the center points using a grease pen or marker. Now, locate the two square tubes attached at the back of the docking module. Each tube is attached via a single M5 bolt. Using a 4mm hex key, remove one of the square tubes from the docking module and set it aside. Loosen the screw on the remaining tube and rotate it 90 degrees so that the two holes on top of the tube align with the two mounting tracks. Align the T-nut inside the mounting track with the open mounting hole in the square tube and use the M5 bolt you just removed to install the square tube onto the docking module. For now, don't fully tighten the hardware. The square bar should be able to slide freely along the rail track. For the next step, we need to install the mounting clamps onto both square tubes. On this wheelchair, the front crossbar has a 1-inch tube diameter and the rear axle has a tube diameter of 1¼ inches, so we will be using two different sized mounting clamps. Now, if your wheelchair does have different tube diameters, make certain that you install the correct size clamps in the correct location on the docking module. For the front mounting clamp assembly, we will install 1-inch clamps onto the square tube that we removed and set aside earlier. When you install the clamps, the smaller half of the clamps should be facing towards the square tube. Secure both 1-inch clamps onto the square tube using two of the M6 socket head screws provided. Make sure that the clamps are perpendicular to the square tube. Now let's move on to the rear mounting clamp assembly, where we will install the larger 1¼ inch clamps onto the square tube that's already on the docking module. The clamps must be installed on the inside of the docking module assembly, with the smaller clamp halves facing the square tube. This ensures that the clamp screws remain accessible when the docking module is installed. Secure both rear clamps using the remaining two M6 socket head screws. Again, making certain the clamps are perpendicular to the square tube. To make the docking module installation easier, we recommend removing the small clamp halves and screws from all 4 of the mounting clamp assemblies. If you're working with two different size clamps, be careful not to mix up the two different size clamp halves. For the next step, we need to determine the appropriate mounting location and orientation of the front mounting clamp assembly on the docking module. There are 3 potential mounting orientations for the front clamp assembly. Those are forward-facing, perpendicular, or rearward-facing. The final mounting location of the docking module should put the front of the docking module approximately 2 inches from the front of the wheelchair seat. So the clamp assembly is best configured in the rearward-facing position. Place the docking module over the clamp assembly and align the mounting holes on the front plate with the holes on the square tube of the clamp assembly. Position the docking module so that it is inset approximately 2 inches from the front of the seat cushion. Then identify which set of holes align between the front plate and the clamp assembly. For this particular installation, we're using the 4th set of mounting holes. Install the clamp assembly onto the front plate of the docking module using the 2 M6 button head screws and nylock nuts provided. Ensure that the screw heads are inserted upwards through the front plate and fully secure the mounting hardware. Next, we can determine the correct mounting position for the rear clamp assembly. Place the front clamps in position on the crossbar, then use your other hand to slide the rear clamp assembly along the rail track until the rear clamps come to rest on the axle tube. Manipulate the docking module linkages so that the angle of the front plate is set roughly parallel to the ground when the wheelchair is upright. The docking module should form a large triangle when adjusted correctly. Use a grease pen to mark the position of the rear clamp assembly on the rail track. Fully secure the rear clamp assembly at the marked position by tightening the 2 M5 bolts. Make certain that the square tube is perpendicular to the rail track following installation. Turn the docking module into position on the wheelchair, making sure the front and rear clamp block assemblies remain properly centered over the reference marks you made earlier. Now reinstall the small clamp halves onto the front clamp assembly. Tighten the clamp screws enough to hold the mounting clamps in place on the crossbar, but do not tighten fully yet. The front clamps should be able to rotate slightly on the crossbar. Next, reinstall the small clamp halves onto the rear clamp assembly so that they encircle the rear axle. Do not fully tighten the clamp screws. The rear clamps should also rotate slightly on the axle tube. With the front and rear clamps installed, we can now make any necessary final fine-tune angle adjustments to the docking module by loosening off the 4 M5 bolts on the lower slider assembly and the 6 M5 bolts on the side of the rail track. Loosening these bolts allows the lower slider assembly and the rail track to be adjusted independently. Adjust the lower slider and rail track until the docking module forms the largest possible triangle, and the front plate sits parallel to the ground when the chair is upright. It may require a combination of adjustments to achieve the optimal setup. Once you've completed the adjustments, tighten the mounting hardware just enough to hold the docking module in position. Before fully securing the hardware, we will need to verify that the front plate is properly leveled and parallel with the ground. The easiest way to verify your setup is to install the companion adapter onto the docking module, then measure to see if the adapter is level. The docking port is the metal hitch that connects the companion power unit to the docking module via the companion adapter. Place the docking port between the rear mounting brackets on the companion unit, with the arrows pointing upward. Slide the docking port up until the top pins align with the bottom edge of the tooth at the front of the companion adapter. Make note of the position of the docking port, then align the mounting holes on the docking port with the nearest set of mounting holes on the companion unit. Loosely secure the left and right docking port plates into position on the rear mounting brackets using the M6 bolts and M6 nylock nuts provided. Please note, before fully tightening the hardware, we will install the companion power unit and verify the docking port is set up in the proper position. To attach the companion power unit to the wheelchair, align the front of the companion adapter with the docking port on the companion power unit. Hook the front tooth on the companion adapter over the upper pin on the docking port. Pull the handlebars of the companion unit slightly upward, then push them forward away from the wheelchair until you hear a click to indicate the connection between the adapter and the companion unit is properly engaged. When installed correctly, the front casters of your wheelchair will be raised off the ground. The recommended gap between the front casters and the ground is 2 inches or 5 centimeters. To disengage the companion from your wheelchair, just pull up on the latch lever at the front to detach the adapter from the companion unit. This unit is equipped with a nylon strap for users with limited hand dexterity, so we'll just pull up on the strap to detach. The companion unit will remain standing as the kickstand deploys.